Hey, how's it going? Yeah, it's going pretty well so far. It's pretty dark here in New York, even though it's only 4:30. Yeah, hope your day is going well. All right, let me go ahead and get this ready. I think the slides should be updated. Let me double check the command myself. Uh, yeah, okay, cool. The slides are working. Nice. Okay, cool. I'm pretty excited for today's session. Hope you guys are as well. At long last, we are starting to move into more advanced frameworks. And honestly, this is one of my favorite ones, Svelte. Svelte is really great. And I think hopefully by the end of today, you'll see what I mean. Um, Especially since you guys have seen kind of how apps with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are built. Hopefully, Svelte will inspire you guys and show you, wow, web development isn't as bad as it seems. Um, we're going to go through a lot of concepts. A lot of the stuff's going to be new, but hopefully we won't get too overwhelmed by new concepts and we can just focus on kind of learning the fun stuff. But yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and maybe kick it off now. Maybe I'll wait one more minute. Let me also make sure I have everything ready here. But yeah, I think we should be ready to go. Yeah, you don't need anything installed right now. We're going to install something new today. We're going to install Node, which is a command line tool that will help us get started with Svelte. But you don't need it right now. Like we'll walk over installing it in a second. All right, I guess I will go ahead and get this kicked off. So welcome to session 12. We're going to be doing an intro to Svelte, which is basically the first framework we're learning here in this class. So I think should be pretty fun. So today our agenda is fairly straightforward. We're just going to be doing a quick dive into kind of what Svelte is. And then we're going to talk about components, which is kind of like a key building block in both Svelte and React. Many people come here to this bootcamp with the goal of learning React. And I always say that Svelte is a great bridge in between learning the basics of JavaScript and learning React. And one of the reasons why it's a great bridge is because there are so many concepts in Svelte that are directly transferable into React. One of the main ones is components. So we'll be kind of diving into what that is, and then you'll understand in the Svelte, so that when it comes time for us to do React, it is going to be a lot less scary. Okay, so then we're just going to do a quick demo of the basics of Svelte on the Svelte official website. There's like a pretty great tutorial that we're going to be like walking through a bit. So we'll do a little bit of that, and then we'll go ahead and switch gears a little bit and talk about how we can get Svelte running on our own machines. And in order to do that, we need Node. So we'll have a section where we kind of go and install Node. And then we're going to go ahead and try to create our own Svelte app on our computer if we have time. And then we'll just go over the homework and do some Q&A. So pretty straightforward. All right, let's get into it. So what is Svelte exactly? So the simplest way to describe Svelte is it's a tool, right? Frameworks are just tools. And it's a tool specifically for building fast web applications. It's similar to JavaScript frameworks such as React or Vue, which also share the goal of making it easy to build these really slick, interactive user interfaces. But there's one big difference, and that Svelte converts your app into JavaScript at build time rather than interpreting it at runtime. Basically, this is fancy talk for saying Svelte, like behind the scenes when you're building your Svelte app, when you build your app for the first time, Svelte takes everything and turns it into JavaScript, just like JavaScript your browser can understand, which is a little different from how some of these other frameworks work. And this basically also means for us that our app is really fast. Like everything we build in Svelte is going to be pretty fast, like performance-wise. So this is nice because we may not notice it, but when an app is really slow or a website's super slow, it's kind of annoying. And what's more, I'm assuming everyone here has a pretty good internet connection. For someone that doesn't have a good internet connection, maybe if their country doesn't have great internet or something else, so maybe they're on like a mobile device in the middle of nowhere, it's really like they'll really feel the pain of having a slow app. So it's really important to have apps that are performant, like they load really fast, and Svelte apps are basically designed to be extremely performant. So they're actually a lot more performant than React, which is nice. So that's a big advantage that Svelte has. Okay, so let's talk about the key concept of Svelte. And this is also happens to be one of the key concepts in React as well. So we'll continue to revisit this. But basically, Svelte revolves around these things called components. And in Svelte, an application is made up of one or more of these components. So what is a component? Well, it's basically a reusable, self-contained block of code that includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all that belong together. And in Svelte, we save it to a .svelte file, right? So we're getting a new file ending here called .svelte. Another way to think about components is by visualizing the different sections of a web page, right? A lot of web pages have very common components, including like a header, right? The header, the bar at the top of the page. If they have a sign up page, that whole page could be a component. In a sign up page, there's usually like a form to fill out. That is also a component. And maybe like the bottom of a website, the footer, that's also a component. So basically anything can be a component really, but like the one way to think about it is that the very common sections of a website that you'll probably reuse, that's what you could think of as a component. And in coming from just HTML and CSS and JavaScript, there's not a really easy way to manage that. I mean, it's not like with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's kind of difficult to create components, which is one of the reasons why building complex apps with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is kind of a pain in the butt. And that's one of the problems that Svelte solves. Okay, so you know me, I like to just kind of go in and show it immediately rather than kind of drone on and on with an example, an explanation. So I'm going to go ahead and share this link in the chat. It's the Svelte tutorial on their website. And we're basically just going to walk through it together. It's actually a really great tutorial. For your homework, I'm going to have you like go beyond what we're doing in the class today. But I just want us to kind of walk through it together, and I think it'll really help us just get into what Svelte is and start understanding it. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. Okay. Okay. I have that open. Hopefully everyone has that open as well. There's going to be a lot of text, so you don't need to worry about this. Like this stuff we've already discussed. But what I want us to bring us attention to is basically this section right here. This is the code editor, and then this is the output. And you might recognize this, right? HTML, very, very basic stuff, and we have the HTML output. But I want us to notice is that the file ending here is .svelte. It's a little different, right? We're going to be now working in .svelte files instead of the usual HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But it's still the same. Like we're going to take the good thing about .svelte is that you can write JavaScript, HTML, and CSS all in the same file, which seems kind of weird, but I'll show you why that's cool in a second. So let's go to the next chapter because this is really just the same intro that I gave in the slides. So you can click next here. And this slide right here is basically one of the key differences of Svelte. So you don't have to, you can read it on your own if you want, but I'll basically just explain it here. So with Svelte, it's a good thing that we can have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all in the same file. And I'll show you why. So let's say we can basically add some JavaScript by creating a script tag, right? Kind of same as HTML. And let's create a variable. Let's follow their example and create a variable called world, like that. So let name equals world. And let's say we wanted to actually replace the world here in our HTML with the variable that's set in here, right? And coming from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that's not super straightforward to do. right? You basically have to select the H1, grab the text, replace it with the variable, and then put it back on, right? If you guys remember our to-do app demo, that was a lot of what we did when we wanted to add like JavaScript to the page. But check this out. For Svelte, all we need to do if we want to add variables in our JavaScript section in our HTML, all we need to do is put curly braces and then put our variable name. So this curly braces and then our variable name, this is going to find a variable called name in our script and pull the value into here. So this is nice because we can call it like it's JavaScript. So if you want to uppercase it, I could do like to uppercase, and you see we have hello, all caps world. And so it's very nice because we can just this is a very simple example. It's not really based on any real world, but the use of or the ability to put JavaScript variables or JavaScript logic in HTML, that's kind of huge, right? That's something that we never really seen before. Before HTML was just like HTML with no logic, right? There wasn't really an easy way to have logic directly in HTML. Well, now, because of how Svelte works, Svelte gives us this really easy way to call whatever JavaScript we want and put it in our HTML with these curly braces. So, so as you can see, we can change this to whatever you want. So I would put my cat's name, hi Bobby. It's reactive too. It automatically updates, which is pretty nice as well. So this is a very simple concept right here, but basically this demo right here shows one of the superpowers of Svelte, which is putting logic in HTML directly, which is nice. Okay, so there's a lot more we can do. Let's go to the next step here. I think they have another demo. Basically, if you want another example of this, you can add a source to this image, right? So here in this JavaScript, they have this variable called source with an image that they created for you, or they have for you. And let's say you want to attach this source to the image. Well, you could do source, and then you can do curly braces, right? Because we need curly braces to call variables from our JavaScript section. And then we can type source again. And then, as you can see, we get rickrolled. And now we get another error, or we get a complaint saying this is basically an accessibility error. I think we've talked a bit about accessibility before, but accessibility is really important for people that maybe they can't see the image or they are using a screen reader. And then we basically want some alt text to show up that describes the image just in case people can't see it. So we can just add an alt attribute here and say well, actually, let's do it the Svelte way. Let's create like a variable called alt, and then say Rick Astley dancing. I think that's the name. And then here in our alt, we can just do brackets alt. Cool. All right, so that got rid of the error. And another thing I want to show is that there are also shorthand attributes. This is obviously something that's unique to Svelte. HTML doesn't allow you to do this, but let's say we have a situation where our variable name, so source, is the exact same as the attribute name. Svelte lets us shorthand this by deleting the source equals part. So it's basically just bracket source. And this is basically the same thing as this. It's just a shorthand. And we can only do that because our variable shares the same name as the attribute. So, if you have a lot of attributes going on, this is just a way to shorten your code, which is nice. So we could do this for alt as well. And as you can see, our code still works. So basically just a shorthand of doing that. Cool. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so before this, we've been talking about how to add JavaScript in HTML. Yeah, it's really cool, right? It's like a very simple concept, but you can quickly see how it saves a ton of time for HTML, right? It's just such a pain for HTML, CSS, JavaScript to select an item, do something with it, and then re-put it back on the DOM. Those days are over now. We're in a new world now where you basically just manage everything within this file, and it's really convenient. So speaking of managing everything, we're also going to be able to manage CSS in the same place, right? So this is nice because think about the CSS files we've written, right? It's basically like one big HTML file for everything, one big CSS file for everything, and one big JavaScript file for everything. You can see as we start to build more complex apps how that can be kind of a pain, right? It's already kind of a pain to deal with like several hundred lines of HTML, CSS. Imagine if that's multiplied by like 10 or 100. So the nice thing about Svelte is because everything is broken up into components, you can put all the CSS for your header component in one place. You can put all the JavaScript logic for your header component in one place, right? So it's like all kind of containerized. Everything's kind of like in its own container or component, which is just a lifesaver when you're building a complex app. So let's go ahead and add some styles here. So we can basically, let's just follow their example. They're adding some styles to the P element. So I'm just going to delete this code here. I'm going to add a P tag to style our P element. And then I'm going to put a color purple, font family, Comic Sans, and then cursive, font size, 2EM. Cool. So it styles this paragraph. And another thing to note is that these rules are scoped. So if we have another component somewhere else, even though this style tag, it's saying it's selecting all the P elements, right? Remember from CSS, like if we do this element level selector, it's going to select all the elements of this name. If we have another component with a P tag that's separate from this component, these styles will not apply because these styles are scoped. These styles are only applied to this component. So it makes, dealing with styles a lot more manageable, right? It's sometimes when you're writing a big CSS file, if you have CSS rules that like overlap with each other, that's kind of a pain to debug. But that becomes a lot less likely when you're scoping styles like this. So it's really nice that the CSS, JavaScript, and HTML is all in one place. Okay, so let's go to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to show, so all this time we've been working with one component, right? Just our app.svelte component. But one of the big advantages of using components is that you can nest components in each other, right? You can have a, speaking of the login page component, like if we had a component that's like our login page, if we have a signed up form or a login form in that page, the login form component would be inside the login page, right? So we can nest components like that very easily with Svelte. So they give us now two files. We have an app.svelte, which is kind of the same one we were working with before, and another component that says nested. Oh, so this is to demonstrate how the scoping works, right? Because remember, in this style tag, we're selecting all P elements. But this demo is to show that like once we put the nested component in our app component, these styles won't apply to the nested because they're only scoped to the app. So first, in order to use a component in another component, we need to import it. So let's go ahead and add a script tag at the top, add a script tag, and then we're going to import our component. So this is going to be a new word. I don't think we've dealt with imports yet. There's a lot to say about imports, but it's basically just like importing a file or a component from another file. So we're importing nested from /nested.svelte. So this is importing this variable right here will basically give us this whole component. So we imported it. Okay. So now in our HTML, so maybe under this P tag, we can put the nested component just like this. So it's kind of a weird syntax, right? Because this looks like an HTML tag, but this is how we render components in Svelte and React too. So this is something that applies to both. But basically this line right here is going to grab all the HTML that's in here and basically place it under. So as you can see, now it says this is another paragraph. But check it out, right? This other paragraph is not styled by our rules. And once again, it's because these rules are only scoped to the app component. They don't apply to any components within. So it makes it really nice, right? It makes it really manageable. And I can see like, we're starting to see like, wow, this can be really powerful, right? Now, all of a sudden, if you want to create an app with 100 components, Before, with just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, let me tell you, it's a nightmare. I've never tried to create something complex, super complex with those languages, but I imagine it's a pain. But now with Svelte, and how everything's componentized, it becomes a lot easier to just compile the components together. So it's really nice. And yeah, so some other notes here is that note that the naming convention is a little different, right? We capitalize the name of components and we render them like this, like within these HTML tags. This is just standard practice for components. Another way to do this is also just by going like this, like that. This is the same thing essentially, but generally when there's nothing inside the tags, then we just use a self-closing tag like this. That's just best practice, but either one will work. All right. Cool. So we're getting somewhere. Now we're starting to learn how to nest components. Let's go to the next step and see what we have. Okay, so this is just a quick demo of like how if your string, or if you have like a JavaScript string that has HTML in it. So here we have a string that says this string contains some strong tag HTML. So I don't know if we talked about strong before, but strong basically, I think, makes it bold. Is that right? Yeah, I think it makes it bold. So it's going to bold this text. But as you can see, if we just take the string, put it in our p tag, it literally says strong, right? Which could be fine, but in this case, we want this text to actually be bolded. So what we have to do is basically convert this string into like an HTML string, right? Because right now it's just a regular string, but an HTML string would actually interpret this as HTML. So Svelte gives us a really easy way to do that. All we need to do in front of the string variable is put at HTML. And this will interpolate this variable as a string into a HTML string. And as you can see, our text is now bolded. So cool, pretty nice stuff so far. Let's move on. Okay, so this is where the basics of Svelte ends. I guess after this, we're gonna go through these instructions, which basically describes how to set it up on your own computer, right? Because obviously we're not on our own computers, we're on a online REPL. But before we do that, let's go over to, I want to talk about reactivity a little bit, because I think that to me is another big superpower of Svelte. So I'm here on these reactivity section in the first part, assignments. So if you guys remember, when we created our counter app or our to-do app with JavaScript, we went through this flow, which is basically like when an event happens, so like a user clicks something, we have to use JavaScript to select the HTML element we want, and then update the value in JavaScript, and then we have to reattach our value to HTML, right? It was a very tedious process. Svelte says, like, why do that, right? Why not just have the stuff that's displayed on the HTML in sync with the JavaScript? So what this means is, instead of having to manually update the HTML, which is what we're doing, right? Svelte is reactive. So whenever the JavaScript updates, like the data in JavaScript updates, the HTML will update as well. Whoops. So let's do a demo here. So they have a very basic setup here for us. They have a button, right, where we have some like this is basically our counter app that we made in HTML and JavaScript, right? So this is just a click button. As you can see right now, it does nothing. And this is where we're going to have to add the logic. So here in our JavaScript, we have a count variable that starts at 0, right? And as you can see, this count 0 is what's being shown in this button. So if we, for example, we change this to 1,000, this text changes. I'm going to change it back to 0. So first, it's going to tell us we need to wire up an event handler. You guys remember how in JavaScript we had to use, like, for example, if there was a button, it'd be like button.addEventListener on click, right? It's very verbose, very wordy. Check this out. All we need to do is on the button element, we just do this: on click equals curly braces. And in the curly braces, we can put the function that we want to be called when there's a click. So we can say increment count like that. Okay, so now our function isn't doing anything, so let's just clear this code out. And let's say when someone clicks increment count, we add 1 to count. So we could do count plus equals 1. And now check this out. When we click it, our counter goes up. Isn't that cool? This wouldn't be cool if I didn't show you guys that how we did it with just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? Because this is a lot less code to do the counter example that we worked on like 2 weeks ago. But as you can see, this is what I mean by reactive, right? As soon as this variable updates, the HTML updates as well. We don't need to manually re-render it. And this is like the simplest demo of reactivity. So yeah, pretty cool, huh? It's pretty nifty and really powerful when you like think about how you can use this to build even more powerful apps. Cool. So I think that's good for now. I mean, the rest of the tutorial is very valuable, but I'll have you guys like walk through the rest. I'm trying to think what else to show. Maybe I'll talk about props a little bit before we move on. Yeah, I'll end this part of the demo with talking about props. So far we've only talked about like internal state, and state is a word that we're going to be talking about a lot when we go into more Svelte and React. Basically, this is like the values that we're dealing with in the JavaScript are only accessible within a component, right? If you go back to the previous page, if we wanted to use this count variable in a different component, we can't do that without props. And props is basically, props is a way for us to pass state between components. So let's see, what's the best example of this? Well, I guess we could just do the example here. So in here we have our app.svelte file, and then we have our nested component. And let's say we have a variable that's defined in Svelte, or sorry, that's defined in the app component that we want to pass into nested. So let's see what we have so far. So right now we import our nested component, we're rendering it, and then we're giving it this attribute that we're defining called answer. And let's say we set it equal to 42. Inside nested, we define an undefined variable called answer. So we're not saying this anything. It's just answer equals undefined basically. And then we say the answer is answer. And if we look at our output, it says the answer is undefined, right? Which makes sense because right now this answer is just looking for a variable called answer, and this variable is undefined. So it makes sense why it's saying undefined. But wait, we wanted to actually say 42, right? Because let's say the answer that we have is not available in this nested file. Let's say it's only available in app.svelte. So to pass it in, we have to set up props. And one way we could do that is we have to give it this attribute called answer, set it to the value, and then here in our nested component, we have to actually accept the props. And to accept it, we can just put an export keyword in front of the variable that we want to accept. So just with this export, basically we're saying this answer variable, whoever or whichever component uses the nested component, we can set the answer. So now this variable 42 is passed into the answer prop, which is set up here, and then now the answer is 42, which is what shows up here in our output. Once again, this feels weird, right? It's going to be a little strange, and it's going to take a while to get used to. But once you understand this concept, this will be a huge. This will help a lot when it comes to learning React, because all of the stuff that we talked about is basically transferable to React. It's very similar. React is just a more confusing way of learning it. So that's why I like Svelte. It's like an easy way to learn the core concepts without having to get into the hairiness of React. Okay, not going to talk about too much about props yet, but I just wanted to show that very basic example. Really, I want you guys to focus on the reactivity part and just the basics of Svelte. Props are kind of like a bonus section that you guys will learn more about in the homework. All right. Cool. So now it's time to shift gears a little bit and talk about how we can set up Svelte on our own computers. So in order to do that, it's time for us to introduce a new tool that you might have heard of before called Node. And Node is basically a way to run JavaScript on the command line, and Svelte happens to use it. So we need to install it. And the easiest way to install it is just to download it straight from the website. So I'm going to share the link in the chat for the Node website. If you're not sure if you have it installed, you can open up a terminal and type in Node, specifically Node-V, I think. Maybe a dash V, something like this. If you type that command in your terminal, you can see if you have it installed already. But if not, go ahead and click that link I just shared in the chat. It should be just nodejs.org. And then, for whatever operating system, it should give you a recommended download. People ask, like, which one should you download? Honestly, in the beginning, it won't really matter when you're a beginner. But just to keep it consistent, if you want an explicit version, I just usually go with the LTS, which is basically the last stable version. So you can just download 18.12.1. But really, as long as you download anything that's above like 16, it's fine. It's not going to make too much difference right now. But if you do want a recommended one, I use Node 18 right now. But if you download 19, it's fine. It's not going to cause any issues, really. All right, so go ahead and download that. That should take like a minute to go through it and set up. Let me know in the chat if you do need more time. We'll give some time to like let people install it. I'll set like a quick timer for like I'll do like a minute 30 seconds. And if you do need more time, just let me know in the chat and we can extend it. But I'll go ahead and set that. Oh, long-term support. I guess that's what LTS stand for. I was like, wait, I didn't know if it was like last. I thought it was like last stable. Then I was like, wait, what about the T? So that makes more sense. LTS is long-term support. Thank you. All right, so if you do, yes, to check if you have it installed. So after you install it, go ahead and just open up a terminal. And I think if you type node-v, press enter. Yeah, it should tell you what version of Node you have. And if you see this, then it's working. If it says like Node is not a command, then something's up. So let me know when you're able to run node -v in your terminal, and that will confirm that's working. And let's see how much time we have. We have 43 seconds before we move on. Ow, my neck. Okay, let's see how much time do we have. 19 seconds. Do let me know if you don't have it installed yet. Previous version was 12. Nice. Yeah, I was running on a really old version for quite some time, and then some of my builds stopped working, so I finally decided to upgrade. But yeah, really, there's not too many differences. It's just it's better to use a more stable version. Okay, and that is my timer. Let me know if you do need more time to install Node. If you're having any issues, if you're not able to install it, don't worry about it. You can always do this on your own time. The rest of today's presentation, a little bit more time, sure. Yeah, let me add maybe like another minute. Thanks for the call out there. And yeah, if you're having issues or any errors, do let me know, and then we can address them. But I just added another minute to the clock. Okay, let me add more time, and then while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and just get ready for the next step. Oh, Chainsaw Man today. Yeah, for sure. I didn't watch the last week's episode, so I got 2 episodes to catch up on, so pretty excited for that. That's probably what I'm going to do right after this session. It says installed, but the terminal's giving back node is not defined. Let's see. You might have to. So there could be a couple problems here. It could be that like you have node installed, but the node command isn't on your path variable, which is basically like a fancy way of saying that the terminal's not picking it up as a command. We can test that, but let me see. So node is not installed. Command. Let me. This is a Windows way of doing it, or I guess, yeah, if you're on Windows, maybe you should, this guide might help. So if for Windows, let me share this article. This is what I found worked for me for my Windows. For Mac, if you're on Mac, you're on Mac. Okay, gotcha. Let's see. You might have to restart your terminal. Sometimes that works. So if after you've installed Node, try to close your terminal and reopen it and see if that works. Random question: is it normal that I suck at Flexbox and Grid? Yes, that is 100% normal. Flexbox and Grid, I would say like I've been doing front end for like 7 to 8 years and I still suck at Flexbox and Grid. So I think that's totally normal. They're like really confusing. Actually, they one of my favorite like front end bloggers or like teachers, Josh Camo, he just wrote this really great guide to Flexbox. Like I wish I had this article like years ago, because I find that this is like the simplest explanation of Flexbox. So I just linked that in the chat. Check that out when you get a chance. I think that will help a lot. I also think the other thing that helped my understanding of Flexbox is honestly just working with Tailwind a lot. I think seeing Tailwind templates and seeing how they use Flex gave me a better idea. But yeah, Flexbox is still something I struggle with sometimes. But yeah, check out this article and see if it helps. I like how all the demos are like interactive. It just makes it a like really visual way to learn it. Okay, sounds like we have Node working. It looks like restarting the terminal was the fix. Cool, that's good. So yeah, if you're also having trouble, try restarting your terminal, and if that's not working, do let me know. Cool. So it sounds like we're all good with Node. I'm gonna go ahead and continue, but once again, if you're still having troubles, do let me know. We can troubleshoot during the Q&A or offline or something. Okay, so now that we have Node installed, we're going to basically walk through and create our own counter app on our computer. Basically the same thing that we saw in the REPL, but just on our own machine. So I'm gonna go ahead and in my terminal, I'm gonna just, I guess this is kind of like a mini review of yesterday. If you weren't yesterday, no worries. But I'm gonna go ahead and cd into my projects folder, and then to my bootcamp projects folder, cd there, and then we're gonna run this command, this weird looking command, and this is gonna create a Svelte template for us, right? So normally, like when we create projects, I know that we've been creating them from scratch, but typically when we work with like Svelte and React, we use some kind of script that sets up everything for us, because we don't, it's kind of annoying to do it yourself. So go ahead and copy this command. I'm gonna share it in the chat as well. And this command, you should run it when you're in the folder that you want to create your project in. So in this case, I'm in my Bootcamp projects folder. Paste it. And before you press enter, if you want to change the name from my app right here, so this is going to create a folder that says my app, and it's going to have all the Svelte stuff in it. In this case, I'm going to call this Svelte counter because we're going to create a basic counter app. And you can leave everything else the same. And I'll go ahead and press enter. So it's going to ask if it's going to say like need to install the following packages, create fight. Just go ahead and press Y to say that it's okay. Okay. So it should give you this instructions like scaffolding project, done, now run. It's going to tell you cd into the Svelte counter folder, npm install, and npm run dev. So we're not talking too much about Node and all of that today. Basically, npm install or npm is a tool that comes with Node that basically helps us manage packages. It helps us like manage Node apps. npm install is a command that lets you install all the packages. So basically, it's going to install Svelte for us. And then npm run dev is going to start up a server with our app ready. So one of the good things about using npm run dev here in this project is, do you guys remember when you guys were building HTML, CSS, JavaScript, when you made a change, you had to save the change, go into the website and refresh? Well, I have good news. Those days are over. Now with modern build tools like Vite, which is what we're using here, and Webpack, every time we make a change and save it, our web app automatically updates. We don't need to refresh. So good news. You don't have to ever save and refresh the page ever again, unless you're, of course, building a regular HTML, CSS, JavaScript file, which most modern web developers never do. So yay. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Let's go ahead and cd into our folder that we created. I'm going to run npm install to install the packages. So we should see this running up. Okay. All right, good. So as long as you saw something like added 25 packages, then we're good. Don't worry about the warn or like any of that other stuff. Those are just like warnings. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our code first. So I'm going to open this folder in my code editor. Whoopsies. Let me open my folder. Svelte counter, open. All right. Yes, I trust. Okay. As you can see, now we have a lot more files, right? We have a lot more files than before, and that's because that script that we ran basically set up all these files for us. So this is more like what a professional web project looks like. So that's nice. And there's a lot to go through here. I encourage you to spend some time like kind of going through the files and folders and figuring out what's going on. I'll just do a very quick rundown. So also, since this is our first time working with Node, this file is at the core of every Node project. So every time you work with Node, one way to know it's a Node project is if it has this file called package.json. And what package.json is it's basically a configuration file that lists all the packages that are included in the app. So in this case, if we look at the dev dependencies section of our package.json, we can see we have 3 packages. We have this Svelte.js plugin for Vite, we have the Svelte package, and then we have the Vite package. So yeah, this is basically just saying, hey, like we're gonna use these 3 packages, and then when we run the npm install command, what npm install does is it looks at these dependencies and it installs them all. Specifically, it installs them to this folder called node modules. So if you click on this node modules, you'll see a ton of folders, right? And you basically don't need you can just ignore this stuff. You don't need to really look at it. But basically, these are all the packages that are being included in our project. So this is kind of like a big paradigm shift, because if you remember from before of just building HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we weren't really using any packages, right? We were just doing everything in what they call vanilla JavaScript, right? We weren't requiring anything. But now that you guys are being introduced to Node, because it's kind of similar to how I view APIs. Like APIs are just tools that other people have built that we can use. Same with packages. Packages are tools that other people have built that we can use. And given that there's thousands to more than thousands, there's like hundreds of thousands of packages out there. This means that like if you want to add payment to your app, or like a YouTube video displayer, or like confetti, or anything like that, it's just a package install away. So it makes it really easy to add new technologies in our apps. Anywho, getting a little sidetracked, but yeah, that's basically what a package.json does. Like the main purpose is to show all the packages that we install. The second thing that is important of package.json is it lists the commands we can run. So all these commands, so dev, build, preview, we can run them in our terminal by saying npm run dev, npm run build, npm run preview. And yeah, dev basically spins up our dev server, which is what's going to let us view our app. So I'll show that in a second. Yeah, not much else to say here. We'll do a deeper dive on package.json when we go to officially talk about Node more. But yeah, this is, I think, a sufficient intro. Okay, so the next thing I want us to bring attention to is the index.html file, right? We're all familiar with index.html, but as you can see, we have a few differences here. One is that we just have this empty div called app. And basically, all the code that we're writing is not in the HTML. We're writing all of our code in .svelte files. And all the Svelte files are basically going to be bundled together and attached to this div. So we call this the root because inside this div is where our whole app is going to be. So let's just leave that for now. And as you can see, they've already set up the script to import this main.js file. And main.js is basically a bundled version of our Svelte. Remember, Svelte basically takes all of our .svelte files, bundles them together into one big JavaScript file, and that's what this JavaScript file is. So we don't need to touch it. All we need to touch are our Svelte files. Okay, so almost done here. Let's go into the source folder right here, and let's check out the app.svelte file. If you're like me and you don't have anything set up, you should see some very ugly syntax. And I say ugly because it's not styled, right? It's all white text, which is kind of hard to read, right? Like, how am I supposed to know that like these sections are different visually? Well, it's not super apparent. But as you can see, I got a recommendation from VS Code saying, hey, do you want to install the recommended extensions? Yes, I do, right? We are going to install the Svelte extension for VS Code that will allow us to easily view this file. So I'm going to click install. And as you can see, it automatically installs the official Svelte for VS Code. It says the Svelte for VS Code extension now contains a TypeScript plugin. Yes, we do. We're not using TypeScript yet, but let's go ahead and just enable this plugin. Oopsies, where did it go? All right, well, mine disappeared. Oh, there we go. Enable plugin. Okay, yeah, that's fine. We just say okay. Yeah, we've already installed Svelte for VS Code, so we're good. Okay, so as you can see, I go back to the app.svelte file, and it's a lot more readable now, right? It's no longer all white. Now we have different sections. Okay, so let's see. I'm just gonna leave this for now. This is just to show the basics, the basic Svelte component we have. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start our server. So let's go back into our terminal. And if you don't want to use the separate terminal, we can go ahead and just close this out and use the integrated terminal. So remember, to use the integrated terminal, you can open the command palette with Command or Control Shift P, and then say open terminal. Or I guess we actually want the integrated terminal. So create new terminal. Yeah, this one, create new terminal command. Or you could do Control tilde. That's another way to do it. But as you can see, now we have a terminal right here, so it makes it really convenient. And in this terminal, I'm going to run npm run dev. So this is going to spin up the dev server for our app. Okay. So if all has gone well, you should see something like this, and you should see localhost 5173. So this is the URL that our app is running on. So if we go ahead and just copy this or command click it, oopsies. I'm gonna copy this, paste this in our Chrome. Okay, so you get this very basic web app. Let me actually put this on the left here. There we go. Okay, so now we have our browser on the left and then our VS Code on the right. Someone asked, so could you also use Hyper for running the dev server? Yes, absolutely. You can. It doesn't matter which terminal you use. So all these commands you can run in the Hyper terminal, your regular terminal, or integrated terminal. It's totally up to you which one you want to use. But yeah, it should work all the same. Okay. Oh, and you just have to make sure that if you're in the Hyper terminal or the regular terminal, you have to make sure you're in the right folder. Like you have to be in this case, the Svelte counter folder to run that command. That's just something to note. Okay, so here we have our, well, I guess that we don't need to create any code because it's already done the counter example for us. But yeah, as you can see, like they have a working example here where you can just click the counter and the count goes up. Yay. Let's see what else to show. Oh yeah, I guess before I dive into the app.svelte, let me show you the main.js really quick. So the main.js, this is what I mean by like everything's bundled, right? Basically, the only thing in this main.js is that we're importing our app component from app.svelte. And in here, this line right here is creating a new Svelte app. So you create the new Svelte app, and check this out, target document.getElementById app. So remember that this div right here with the ID app, this is the target for our Svelte app. So it's basically bundling all of our Svelte code and placing it in this div. So this is how we connect the Svelte code to HTML. Hey there, what is the name of the language? We're right now doing Svelte, and Svelte is a JavaScript framework. So this bootcamp is just focused on like HTML, CS, and JavaScript. But today is our first day diving into the framework of Svelte. But this is basically just JavaScript. This is like, well, Svelte is technically like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all like together, but it runs JavaScript, yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm back in the app.svelte file. Let me show you what I mean by the hot reload. And hot reload is the feature that lets us make changes without refreshing. So for example, if I change this text to like, I don't know, hello world, save, you guys see that? My app instantly changed. I didn't need to refresh. How nice is that? It might not seem like a big deal, but for those of us that have built websites with just HTML, CS, and JavaScript, it's just such a pain to have to refresh your page every time, right? I'm sure lots of people here can relate to that, and now those days are over. Woohoo! So we can just make changes, save them, and then our text instantly changes. And that's all because we're using this, this builder, Vite. All right, cool. What else to show? I guess, a lot of this we talked about in the Svelte tutorial, and you'll have for your homework. But, the main goal of this was just to get this up and running. And, oh yeah, that's right. There is a VS Code extension that refreshes automatically when you hit save. That is true. I did not talk about how to install it. But now, thankfully, with like Vite and stuff and all these modern build tools, we don't have to even install any extensions. It's all built in for us, which is nice. Cool. So let's see what else to show here. I guess we could also show this counter component. So as you can see, like this counter component is right here. Like this component is the counter component. So if we click into the counter component, so one way to like click into the files is you can command click or control click, or you can just like look at the file path. So this is in the lib folder, so right here, and then we get the counter.svelte. And as you can see, this is the same code that we're looking at in the tutorial, right? This is just like the counter code. Let's say we want to create a button that like decreases the count for some reason. So under the button, we can just add a new button. And maybe we would just say minus. Let's just save that. Yeah, there we go. And let's have it so that every time we click this minus button, the count goes down. So let's create a new function. Const equals, or const decrement. Arrow function, and let's say count equals count minus 1. I think is there minus equals? Yeah, there is a minus equals. What am I talking about? I could just use minus equals. So you could do count equals count minus 1, or do count minus equals. Either should work. And then now we're going to add a click handler on our button, and that's as easy as just doing on click equals decrement. So we save that. And now let's test it out. So we click this, yay. So now we have negative numbers. Cool. Not too fancy, but this is just to demonstrate how it's all like coming together. What else? Yeah, that's kind of it. Like, not much else to talk about here, since all of this is like covered in the Svelte tutorial. But if you've gotten to this point, then congratulations, you've gotten your first Svelte app set up, and yeah, this is just the foundations of what's to come next with building apps and stuff. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything I missed here that you guys can't like just dive into on your own. But yeah, I think that's basically it for this demo. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up now. But yeah, as you can see, hopefully from today you guys saw that Svelte is kind of confusing at first. It's like a whole new paradigm, but with how everything's coming together with the reactivity and just like being able to use data in your JavaScript, it's really convenient, right? It's just a lot simpler to think about than the old way of selecting an item or selecting an element in HTML, making a change, and then putting that change back on the HTML. That is so like tedious. And now with Svelte, it's all reactive, so it's really nice. All right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and leave this and go back to the slides. Cool. So yeah, let's talk about the homework. So basically the homework is just to go through the Svelte tutorial. I mean, if you have time, like you are welcome to finish it, but it's quite long. As you can see, there's like 19 total sections. Really before Thursday, I just want you guys to finish up to section 7. So lifecycle. So basically just do all the way, finish the sixth section, but you don't have to get to the 7th. But really, you can go as far as you want. It's just like I recommend at least doing up to section 6. So just stop before that. And here's the link to the tutorial again. If you do need it, I'll paste it in the chat just one more time. But yeah, that's basically the tutorial. And I guess the other part of the homework is if you haven't been able to get up a Svelte app like we did here today, then go ahead and do that as well. But yeah, that's basically it. Like I said, today is just the intro to Svelte. This is just the basics. On Thursday, we're going to be building something a little bit more complex. We're going to build like a more complex to-do app, which is going to combine a lot of the concepts that we learned today with some new ones that you'll do in the homework. And that's going to be our first like more complex app. But yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, I guess we'll take some time for Q&A. But yeah, hopefully that was informative. Hopefully it was helpful. And I hope that you guys see that Svelte is it can be a lot more fun than writing just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'm trying to think what else to say about Svelte. I guess I should share some resources too. I think just like awesome Svelte. Let's see. Yeah, I'll share this link. Basically, this if you're ever looking at a new framework or tool or whatever, if you just Google awesome and then the name of that tool, chances are someone on GitHub has made it like a directory of resources. So I like this one. Awesome Svelte basically just contains like resources for Svelte, like integrations, UI libraries. It's almost too much. Even other discords for Svelte if you do want to check that out. But this is like a good reference in the future if you want to like have more Svelte resources to look at. What else? Yeah, the Svelte website is a gold mine. Besides the tutorial, I highly encourage you to kind of like explore and just check out the website. What else? Yeah, they have lots of good examples that are pretty helpful for learning. But yeah, that's basically it. We will, yeah, so on Thursday, we're going to be doing a lot more advanced stuff with Svelte, like building an actual app. But once again, I want us to remember that Svelte is just the stepping block for us. You can go ahead and become a master of Svelte and build really complex apps, but our final goal for front end is to get to React. So we're really just using Svelte as a stepping stone for React. All that to say is that you do not have to become an expert on Svelte. I just need you to understand components, props, states, and reactivity. I just need you to understand those 4, and if you feel good, then you're good enough for React. Had some issues with the terminal. I'm gonna go back and build it again. Yeah, for sure. Let me know if if that's still an issue, and we can chat about that offline. But yeah, just in general, like installation problems are the worst. That's like the most annoying problem when it comes to for web development. So I totally feel your pain there. We're happy to do some debugging for the terminal issues now, but in general, yeah, I found that if you just install straight from the Node website, you might either have to restart your terminal, restart your computer, and if neither of those work, I would just go ahead and Google like other ways of installing Node. One way is using Homebrew. So like typically if I'm on a new computer and I install Node with that link and it doesn't work, I will use Homebrew to install Node. So this means you need to have Homebrew first, but once you have Homebrew, then you can run brew install Node in your terminal, and that should install it. So if you've restarted your computer in your terminal and Node's still not working, go ahead and try to install with Homebrew and see if that works. But yeah, I would also just like these tutorials that are very helpful. But one thing to note about these installation tutorials that has gotten me in the past is the date. Dates are very important when it comes to programming tutorials, because this tutorial from 2013, I would be very surprised if the advice in this tutorial still applied today. This is like 9 years ago, which is a lifetime in programming years. So I would not like recommend reading installation tutorials if they're more than like a year old, honestly. So for example, like this one is a lot more relevant. This one's 2021. I would say this one was probably more likely to give you success than like this 2013 one. So anywho, just a quick note on like installation, because yeah, installation is a pain. String not in PWD. Error code not in PWD. Interesting. I wonder what that is. String not in PWD. I've never seen that error. What's that? Does that mean? You have to escape the spaces in the argument. I wonder if it's because one of your folder names has spaces. It looks like this person says like, oh, you have a folder name with spaces. You can put the folder name in quotes. I'm not sure if that's the exact issue you're running into, but that is a strange error. Yeah, it could be a folder with spaces. That could be the error. But yeah, let me know if that's still an issue. I haven't quite seen that before. Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes like folder names can be kind of a pain. I've changed folder names just because they have a space in it, just because it's I get sick of putting the quotes around them when I'm using it in terminal. All right. Cool, y'all. I'll probably start wrapping up for today. Pretty concise session, but I didn't want to overload anybody with information. Hopefully, it was just enough to get you guys rolling. And yeah, I think just going through this Svelte tutorial right here, this will give you a lot of clarity. That even if you missed out on some today, it's a really good place to start. They have like one of the best tutorials on the internet for web dev. All right, for sure, y'all. For sure. Hopefully, by the end of these Svelte sessions, you guys will be Svelte fans. Svelte's one of those things that it's not as popular as React, but the people that use Svelte love it, and I can see why. It's like a really simple framework, but it's extremely powerful. All right, cool, y'all. I think that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for joining. So once again, we have a session on Thursday. That'll be a deeper dive into this stuff, and yeah, just keep an eye out on Discord for updates. Let's see what else. I will be uploading the session today, so if you're missing it out, just check that out. But yeah, that's basically it for today. Thanks guys for joining. And oh yeah, if anybody's still having issues with installations, even if all those articles and stuff don't work, just feel free to message me on Discord and we can take a look. All right, guys. Thank you all for coming. See you on Thursday. Bye. Gonna go watch Chainsaw Man now. All right, catch you later.